100 days in, promises made, chaos delivered. As Donald Trump marks his first major milestone in office, the nation is more divided than ever. But has he truly shaken up Washington or just stirred the pot? Everybody in the world would like to deep dive into the first 100 days of Donald Trump's presidency in 2025. Didn't we already do this whole Trump presidency thing? And didn't it age us about 20 years? But like a bad rash, he's back. And this time he's brought his Twitter account with him. America. We're about to take a wild ride through the first 100 days of Trump's second act. January 20th, 2025. A day etched in infamy. Or maybe just another Tuesday. Look, it's hard to get worked up about historical significance when the guy being sworn in looks like he just lost a staring contest with a particularly stubborn cheeseburger. But there he was, Donald J. Trump, back for round 2. The inauguration speech was classic Trump, a rambling, incoherent mess of self-aggrandizement, thinly veiled threats, and enough empty promises to make a used car salesman blush. He vowed to make America great again, which, let's be honest, sounds less like a campaign slogan and more like a desperate plea for relevance. But amidst the usual Trumpian bluster, there was a glimmer of something different. A sense that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Perhaps age had mellowed him. Perhaps the crushing weight of responsibility had finally humbled him. Or perhaps, and this is the more likely scenario, he just really missed having his name on everything. Surprisingly, some people were cautiously optimistic. They hoped Trump had learned from his past mistakes, that he would govern with experience and wisdom, ignoring his reality TV experience and impulsive decisions. The stock market bought into the optimism. The Dow Jones saw a modest bump, like lemmings marching towards a cliff. Then came the executive orders and market crash, leading to an economic meltdown. But we had a few hours of optimism, before reality crushed it like an ant under a MAGA hat. Executive orders. The presidential equivalent of a do not disturb sign on your office door. Except instead of politely asking people to leave you alone, you're unilaterally enacting sweeping policy changes that affect millions of people. Fun, right? Now, most presidents use executive orders sparingly, reserving them for matters of national security or urgent situations. Trump, however, treated them like his personal Twitter account, firing them off with the restraint of a toddler hopped up on sugar and conspiracy theories. Within his first 48 hours in office, Trump had signed more executive orders than most presidents sign in a month. It was a dizzying display of executive overreach, a bureaucratic blitzkrieg that left even the most seasoned political analysts scrambling to keep up. And the content of these orders? One of Trump's first acts was to reinstate the global gag rule, which prohibits U.S. funding to organizations that provide abortions or even information about abortion. This, despite the fact that study after study has shown that restricting access to abortion doesn't reduce the number of abortions, it just makes them less safe. But hey, who needs facts when you have ideology, right? He also wasted no time in slapping tariffs on goods from China, Mexico, and Canada, because apparently nothing says making America great again, like starting a trade war with your closest allies. This, predictably, sent shockwaves through the global economy, as businesses scrambled to adjust to the new reality of unpredictable trade policies. And if that wasn't enough, he also moved to dismantle environmental regulations, because apparently breathing clean air and drinking clean water is for socialist snowflakes. This, of course, delighted his friends in the fossil fuel industry, who celebrated by pumping even more carbon emissions into the atmosphere. The dominoes were falling, and the initial tremors of the coming earthquake were being felt across the nation. Buckle up, folks. It's about to get bumpy. All right, so Trump's been sworn in, the Eagles are recovering from their existential dread, and everyone's trying to figure out if Make America Great Again comes with an instruction manual. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But hey, maybe the stock market has some answers, right? After all, isn't a surging stock market the ultimate sign of a healthy nation? Well, about that. Remember that optimism we talked about? Turns out the market took one look at the new administration's agenda and said, yeah, we're going to need a stiff drink and a long, hard think about this. What followed wasn't exactly a crash, more like a controlled demolition by a bunch of very nervous bankers wearing novelty Make America Trade Again hats. Turns out when you base your entire economic policy on aggressive tweets and vaguely threatening promises to bring back coal, investors tend to get a little bit spooked. And by a little bit spooked, I mean they reacted like they'd just seen their retirement fund dressed in a full-on cat's costume. It wasn't pretty. The thing is, market dips happen. It's the circle of market life. Like Simba being held up on that cliff, but with less Elton John. However, this felt different. This felt like the opening act of a financial production of Waiting for Godot, where Godot is a stable economy and everyone's starting to realize he's not actually coming. Now, it's important to remember that correlation does not equal causation. Just because the market took a nosedive after Trump took office doesn't necessarily mean it was his fault. Uncertainty in the market is like that weird smell in your grandma's attic. You might not be able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but you know it's not good, and you want to get away from it as quickly as possible. The market was not thrilled, and the first 100 days were a bumpy ride, to say the least. Now, even if the market was busy soiling itself in fear, surely the American people, the very people who chanted "build that wall" and lock her up with such gusto, were feeling pretty good about their choice, right? Well, about that. You see, there's this thing called a honeymoon phase in politics. It's this magical period after an election where, for some reason, everyone pretends to get along and the new president enjoys a brief surge in approval ratings. Think of it like the first few weeks of a new relationship when you're still ignoring all the red flags and pretending your significant other's snoring is actually kind of cute. But for Trump, the honeymoon phase was about as real as Melania's smile in public. It was like someone had forgotten to book the honeymoon suite, and instead, they ended up stuck in a Motel 6 with flickering lights and a suspiciously stained mattress. The polls, those little numerical snapshots of the national mood, were not kind. In fact, they were downright historically bad. It was like the entire country had taken one look at the new first family, at the chaos unfolding in Washington, and collectively muttered, "What have we done?" Trump inherited a deeply divided nation, a dysfunctional Congress, and a chaotic global landscape. He promised to drain the swamp, but delivered more of the same. More Twitter rants, more scandal, and a level of incompetence. Public opinion soured, and MAGA hats gathered dust. A sense of buyer's remorse grew. The first 100 days were not just a honeymoon phase gone wrong, but a harbinger of tumultuous times to come. All right, strap in everyone, because the international scene during these 100 days makes a Real Housewives reunion look like a Quaker meeting. Trump, conducting diplomacy like ordering room service, confused Montenegro for Mordor. Tensions with allies were higher than his proposed border wall. It was like watching a toddler with nuclear weapons and Twitter. While the world deciphered his tweets, he cozied up to authoritarian leaders. Like a panda befriending wolverines, you can't look away. Relationships with long-standing allies? More strained than Trump's relationship with the truth. Phone calls with world leaders were reportedly cut short. Treaties were torn up with the grace of a toddler refusing to eat their vegetables. And the phrase America first took on a whole new meaning. It was less, let's all work together, and more everyone for themselves, which, let's be honest, isn't exactly a recipe for global stability. Remember that old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Well, Trump seemed to have missed that memo. He publicly sparred with leaders of countries that, actually like us, while simultaneously praising authoritarian figures who, let's just say, aren't exactly known for their commitment to democracy. It was like watching a chef throw out perfectly good ingredients while rummaging through the trash for something better. The global community looked on with a mixture of amusement and horror, like watching a car crash in slow motion. You knew it was going to be bad, but the sheer absurdity of it all was somehow captivating. And through it all, the man at the center of the storm seemed utterly unconcerned, tweeting insults and threats with the casual indifference of someone ordering another Diet Coke. Remember that whole drain the swamp thing? Yeah, about that. Turns out Trump's version of draining the swamp was more like replacing the water with something a bit more viscous. And by viscous, I mean scandals. Oh, so many scandals. Look, I know what you're thinking, John. Surely even for Trump, 100 days is too short a time to rack up a truly impressive number of scandals. And to that I say, hold my beer, because you clearly underestimate the man's capacity for generating controversy. We're talking scandals upon scandals, a veritable buffet of bad decisions and questionable ethics. From alleged ties to foreign governments to accusations of obstruction of justice, the news cycle was a constant churn of shocking headlines and even more shocking denials. It was like watching a game of whack-a-mole, except instead of moles, it was scandals. And instead of a mallet, it was the collective weight of the free press, desperately trying to hold this administration accountable. And if you thought the constant barrage of scandals would lead to some introspection, some semblance of remorse, well, you clearly haven't been paying attention. Because instead of addressing the concerns of, the entire country, the administration chose a different tactic: deny, deflect, and distract. Remember Kellyanne Conway and her now infamous alternative facts? That, my friends, was just the tip of the iceberg. We were treated to a masterclass in gaslighting, as blatant falsehoods were presented as truth, and any attempt at accountability was met with accusations of fake news. It was enough to make you question your own sanity. And let's not forget about the constant attacks on the media, the very institution tasked with holding power to account. Journalists were branded as enemies of the people, and any reporting that dared to question the administration's narrative was dismissed as fake news. It was a blatant attempt to undermine public trust in one of the cornerstones of a functioning democracy. Now, let's talk about the economy, shall we? Trump prides himself on his business acumen, promised to make America great again with tax cuts and deregulation. So, how'd that work out? Reality was far from the rhetoric. Remember those soaring stock market numbers? As sustainable as a house of cards on a roller coaster, trade war with China began to bite. Like a toddler playing Jenga with the global economy, starting a trade war with China isn't the best economic strategy. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. And while the wealthy celebrated their tax cuts with another round of champagne and caviar, the average American was left wondering when exactly this whole trickle-down thing was supposed to kick in. Because, spoiler alert, it didn't. Wages remained stagnant, healthcare costs continued to rise, and the gap between the rich and everyone else grew wider than the Grand Canyon. The promises of economic prosperity turned out to be about as substantial as a Trump campaign promise. Which is to say, not at all. The truth was, the only thing trickling down was anxiety. As businesses grappled with uncertainty, farmers faced bankruptcies due to the trade war, and the average American wondered if they were ever going to catch a break. So, there you have it, folks. The economy under Trump's first 100 days. A masterclass in how to take a relatively stable economy and turn it into a ticking time bomb of debt, uncertainty, and inequality. Now, you might think that faced with a plummeting stock market and a president who seems to tweet first and think, well, let's be honest, never, the American people might just take it lying down. But you'd be wrong. Oh, so very wrong. Because across the country, from the heartland to the coasts, Americans donned their pink hats, dusted off their protest signs, and took to the streets. United not by some grand ideology, but by a shared sense of what in the ever-loving Cheeto-dusted hell is going on. Of course, it wouldn't be America without some good old-fashioned division. Millions marched in protest, millions cheered Trump on, convinced he was draining the swamp. This wasn't just a difference of opinion. This was a fundamental rift in American society. Families were torn apart. Thanksgiving dinners became minefields. Even book clubs devolved into shouting matches. The country was engaged in a massive game of tug-of-war, and in the middle stood Trump, navigating a deeply divided nation. This was America in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, a nation on edge, teetering on the precipice of something. So here we are, 100 days in. A milestone marked more by chaos and confusion than any real sense of accomplishment. It's like trying to assess a student's progress after they set fire to the classroom. The markets took a nosedive faster than a pigeon escaping an aggressive toddler. The world looked on with a mixture of amusement and horror. So, what does the future hold for America? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Predicting Trump's presidency is pure chaos. One thing's for sure. It's going to be a bumpy ride. The divisions are deeper than ever. The global stage is volatile. And Trump, well, he's still Trump. Well, there you have it. 100 days of the Trump presidency, a period marked by more upheaval, controversy, and sheer bewilderment than perhaps any other modern presidency. Whether you're relieved, terrified, or just plain confused, one thing's for sure: America and the world will never be the same. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.